Okay, we're set. Okay, I make a motion that we open the meeting.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Will.
Aye.
Trustee Marshall.
Aye.
Trustee Winbeck.
Aye.
Trustee Coe.
Aye.
Mayor Plummer.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, the meeting is open, and actually, for the record, it's a workshop. It's an informal workshop to sort of circle back on our active transportation plan that we worked on, oh boy, 8 years ago now, I think, roughly, jointly with the town. And the town also is reviewing their plan as well. So we thought, let's sort of kick things off. We're delighted to have David Cruzy here from Labella, who has done quite a bit of work with our village in the past. In our packet and also available online are, prior studies, things that have been conducted here in the village in, quite a bit of detail throughout the village. And I know, David, you're very familiar with all of this because you were spearheading this as well. So we're appreciative that you're here today. And I think really just to sort of kick this off, this is sort of the first time we're kind of even regrouping on any of this is maybe to just sort of, you have what's sort of been looked at in the past. Where do we all still think we have things to identify potentially? And, obviously some of the stuff we've checked the boxes on the list, but I think it's just really more of an informal session in terms of some thoughts on concerns and issues in the village, And I think always, just to sort of frame, kind of the environment here in the village, our goal is to be a walkable village and a bikeable village. We did just pass some legislation regarding e-bikes and e-scooters. David, I'll forward that to you so you can see that. Yeah.
It's a hot topic.
It's a really hot topic, let me tell you. So, we're implementing that and getting information out to people and all of that. So there's that piece of it. But also, as everybody knows, we have major state roads running right through the heart of our village. So if that's always kind of something to be reckoned with as we move forward, because we do not own those roads. So one thing that we have been doing, and we did complete the work redoing South Street and Wood Street. I don't know if you had a chance, you can go down there. I would recommend that you do. The road has been redone. It's great work. We also have put in some additional safety measures with our crosswalks, similar to what was done on Shane Place, where the crosswalks, they have the white outline and then the green painted inset. So we've done that on South Street, and it's really created an additional level of visibility. And I'm saying that because I think it might be a good place for us to even start, because we still know that there's speeding on South Street when you're coming off of Jefferson Road past the Ford Field entrance. So it may be sort of the lower hanging fruit in all of this. We have thought about maybe doing some kind of a very low speed table through that portion before you hit the curve around the bend, coming up to where the stop sign is. Our DPW has been down there to take a look at that. They have identified a location, and if the board is amenable, maybe we could also have, Dave circle back and look at that in terms of a possible way for additional traffic calming down there. I think, it'd be nice if we could have a couple action items coming out of this and things that maybe we can look at in the future. But I thought that's kind of an easy place to start, because so much has already been done down there.
Yeah, I haven't traveled down south in probably about a month or so.
Okay.
But I do recall there, it was being staged for some work. I know that's been a segment of road for ages being talked about as a speeding concern, speeding issue.
Yeah.
I know that years ago the speed limit was changed down to
20
miles per hour, which I know that there's been talk about that one, but it's certainly been a stretch of road. You've got that straight shot basically from the curb there, as you know.
Yeah.
Down Jefferson, it's a straight shot.
Yeah.
That'd be a speedway for some.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And we've taken our speed studies out there years ago. Seeing these, the 85th, they're above what we want to see out there.
Yep.
And one of the things, I'll wanna sort of, for myself, circle back on a couple of things, but, I recall years ago, this has been something that we've talked about with the village, a number of years now, especially going way back to, it was before my time, but it was at the firm that I worked at, was after that,
Mhm.
the traffic plan for the village. And that one, talked a lot about, and we talked since about what is the target speed? What is, we've got a lot of different speed categories. We got
Mhm.
posted speed, operating speed, AFib, we
Mhm.
go through the whole thing. What is our target? What do we want to see the speeds out there? Be, and there's plenty of studies out there that always reference the pedestrian fatality risk at,
Yeah, certain.
30, 40, and that's
Yes.
talked about and
Mhm.
memorialized in the ATP there.
Mhm.
So yeah, obviously we want to get these speeds down as low as we practically can,
Yeah.
where we can, and of course, have to manage the jurisdictional
Issues.
agencies and issues perhaps with DOT on their roads.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, for those of you, just to take a quick step back, for an intro, for myself, yeah, I was with SRF at the time. SRF has since been, Steve Ferrani, he's retired, so SRF went away unfortunately. But a lot of his actions and our work still lives on, especially in Pittsburgh. We've been blessed to have worked with the village and in the village for many years
Many
now.
years, yeah.
Personally, myself, I started at SRF in 2011 and started working with the village and projects there and thereabout since that time. So, over the years, got a chance to work on some traffic calming
Mhm.
projects over on Grove Street, Bowden, of course, on South. This is one, looked at the four corners from an analysis, the right turn lanes, do we need them, do we not? The left turn lane coming down, Main Street there, do we need the length of it? We've looked at that and, I know that there's we do a lot of studying.
Mhm.
But again, that's one of those intersections and areas that it's challenging from the DOT.
Yeah.
We've gotten a lot of commentary there. So fast forward, yes, I'm at Labella now, but certainly still in the area, still practicing the same work that I've always done and so blessed to kept up communications with you, Mayor, and looking forward to helping the village out any way we can. So going back, the ATP, that was a nice joint effort between Ingalls Planning Design and
That's
SRF
right.
Associates. It's a fantastic exercise of going through jurisdictional and municipal agreements there
Mhm.
between the village and the town. Each had their own unique issues. And so, we hope that the plan really shed light. There's a lot of commonality, there's a lot of uniqueness.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, as we sit here today, let's get into it. Let's tackle it.
Yeah, just getting back to the relationship with the town as well. I think what really came out of that whole process, because I was on the committee at the time, was the identification very specifically of gateways
Yes.
coming into the
Yes,
community
those
and
transition zones.
the transition zones and the impact of the higher speed limits
Yeah.
outside of the village and then coming into the village.
And unfortunately, it's a common issue that villages like this experience, whether it's villages, hamlets, especially out rural areas. Yeah, you step down from a 55-mile-an-hour road, which people are doing faster than that, 65, onwards and upwards, and then you got to step down to perhaps 30, or So there's that. It's a very stark drop.
Mhm.
And, obviously we've heard that and seen that, over the years, on the east and west sides of the village, even in the south part. So, attempts have been made over the years, of course, we've seen now the new median that's going in over the west side, east side, we're seeing the construction of that median and hopes that, that's going to contribute to more speed management, but yeah, it's those transition zones, those can be challenging.
And even getting a little tiny pedestrian refuge in front of Belmonte across to the dairy, so you don't die trying to go get an ice cream.
Yeah, that logical location.
Yeah.
That made sense. You've got two highly active and pedestrian generators on each side, especially during beautiful days like
like the
this.
season, yeah.
Yeah, so,
I read an article just recently about driver perspective, and they were talking about that with the speed limit change when you come into a small village. From a driver's perspective, they see the sign that goes from the 55 to, but if they don't see a different lane, streetscape. Yeah, if
Exactly.
the streets, if
Or
the
visual
streets,
cues.
yeah, if the streetscape doesn't change from where they were, then they disregard.
Yeah.
They're like, why am I gonna drop the same street I'm driving on? So that's a huge impact for perspective.
And that's why the
perspective.
median that's just is going in
Yes.
will make a big impact.
Exactly, and they
Yeah.
see like a different, oh, there's some different.
and yes, and DOT, we've heard this certainly from New York State DOT, county DOT to an extent, but certainly state DOT over the years. I recall some of the safety folks over there. You can't just change the posted speed limit because it's not really going to affect anything, because if you haven't done anything for design or to
Right.
alter the behavior or the feeling of behavioral changes that you need,
Mhm.
then yeah, you're not going to see it. In fact, you might even, experience issues, adverse issues, because now you've got some folks that are going to mind that. Then you're gonna have folks that don't because they just feel like they can drive faster.
Mhm.
And then that's where that speed
Tailgating,
differential,
yeah.
that speed differential incidents can arouse. So,
I think, and actually it's something that you and Steve taught me years ago, was traffic calming is never one thing.
no, you have to do it with the package.
Yes.
State
Sure.
pedestrian safety action plan from years ago, they actually call out, these are treatment packages. We really do have to, it's not, it's part of the
layered.
system. It's layered, the systemic approach to
Mhm.
speeding or
Yeah.
safety. Yeah, so you've got to get the design right on the roadsides, whether it's through buildings or trees or
Mhm.
landscaping, anything like that, monuments for gateways. Or if you could do something in the road vertically,
Mhm.
we're limited for what we can do, whether it's speed humps or anything like that.
Yeah, and there's first
State
responders and, yeah.
First responders that we've got to deal with and then work with. Certainly, all going back here,
Mhm.
that it brought back memories of some earlier meetings with some of the emergency responders at the time. And, we've got to be very sensitive to their responses.
Yeah.
And what they're responding to, and where are their priority routes.
And I think what we're missing here in the village, and we're just starting to do this, is color. Color is significant, and it doesn't really affect like for emergency vehicles, because there's not a change.
Yeah.
But we just started to put color crosswalks in the village streets that we own. And it's made a huge impact. I know, just me walking, you can really see that there's a crosswalk there.
Yeah.
And I liked, you did a lot of coloring on the bike path or on the bike
Yeah.
routes. That's really important, because I think for bikers and drivers, you see a color change, no one's gonna go into the bike lane, right? So I really think we should maximize the use of color in our village. I think that would really make an impact.
Yeah,
No, it's just, certainly we can do that on streets we own.
correct.
And you want to
It's
speak to
harder-
that,
it's
yeah.
harder to do it, especially on DOT roadways that certainly fall under the federal purview of
Mud
what
safety.
our standards, our manual on uniform traffic control devices and FHWA guidance. So we've got to be cognizant and sensitive to what we can do and what we can't do, certain things. But, as you said, it's on your streets, the toolbox gets a lot deeper and bigger.
Yeah, so that's something we definitely want to circle
Yeah.
back on.
So, I know the state roads are their own animal,
Yes.
but there has to be some sort of toolbox, even if it's smaller, where you can kind of fast track certain, especially if it's a safety,
Yeah.
right? So what have you seen in working with other municipalities of little things that we can, how we should phrase things, who we should be reaching out to, how we should be reaching out to the state and DOT to implement certain areas for safety improvement?
Sure, yeah, the state in their highway design manual, unfortunately, they haven't updated it for quite a while, this chapter, but they have the chapter. It's on traffic calm. I don't know when, I gotta look at the latest revision date on it, but they do speak through traffic calming. We years ago, SRF, we took that table and concocted it into, an SRF branded one, but using that. So based on different roadways, speed, volumes, perhaps classes too, because you've got to deal with, national highway, system, roadways.
Mhm.
Those are roadways that have to maintain certain minimums because they're sort of part of the priority network or roadway system for the country, the state. But then there's others that are off that system that you can perhaps open up a little bit more, but certain things, quick wins, it's take a look at lane widths. Can we get it down to the minimum standard? Can we, get away from 13s down to 11s, or perhaps 10s in certain areas?
Okay,
10s could be a little challenging.
I was gonna ask you what the very minimum is.
Yeah, I mean, 10s, it's certainly good on side streets, village streets, but
Mhm.
you start to find that can be a little narrow depending on the vehicle mix.
Yeah,
We saw that years ago, I think on Airport Road, or in front of Fisher. When it was, before it got down, before it had the road diet, to where it
Mhm.
is today, it had the 2 lanes in each direction. And I seem to recall that those were, I believe, 4 10s, if not, they were very, maybe 10 and a half, but you're driving down that, especially if you're right next to a RTS bus
you're
or
really right there.
those windows, or those mirrors, yeah, you're kind of getting pinched, which, it's good. We want to constrict things, we want to make it, have that side friction, feel like we really need to slow our speeds, but that can sometimes, again, be a challenge and pose unintended
And
consequences.
what's standard 12, did you say?
11.
11.
Should be.
11s are standard.
Pretty, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good comfortable minimum to shoot for.
But
Especially
what are they doing? What is DOT usually doing?
Most of the time they are doing 11s, depending on, but
Yeah, they did that on East Ave, I think.
yeah, depending on the corridors, though, if there's higher, vehicle, mixes or a greater mix of traffic, you got more heavy vehicles, perhaps you're gonna see more of a 12-foot ride, maybe even 13, depending if you're on a corridor like, in Henrietta or Jefferson Road.
Check road.
That's, you're gonna see the larger lane widths
Yeah.
just because of the vehicle movements that you accommodate.
I have a question, just because, we're seeing this even with parking, with cars are so much larger,
Yeah, yes.
And, now we're talking about limits and how do we, and we've
Yeah.
got some of these like starships,
Yes.
docking here,
Yeah.
And so even just in terms of parking, our parking monitors said, you see these huge cars trying to fit into a spot and they're still overhanging the next spot, like we really, that's a whole other thing we're gonna have to take a look at.
Yeah, and I think, but what's the village have a minimum, is it 8 feet?
I can't remember what our minute, I was just trying
Parking.
to, I think we might have expanded it, we might have.
Well, the issue run into is some of these like a Ford Super Duty, right?
That's it.
You get the mirrors, they're
Correct.
actually allowing you to see behind you.
Correct. And then,
Between the dually in the back and the mirrors, you're
yeah,
out.
and then if you're a cyclist, you're going by.
Run right in.
Class dooring, but in this case, it's not even dooring, it's just you might just get, you might clip the.
Yeah, like a side-
Windows,
yeah.
the mirrors, yeah.
I guess personally, I'm not about to make parking spots the size of very large trucks. I figure they can park somewhere else.
Right.
In the
Very-
main-
Well,
Right, and striping a parking spot size smaller than that massive truck would, generally speaking, have them park somewhere else, I think.
Well, what we did for a while, and this was when NISTOC came through and did the, the big, like the North Main Bridge and stuff, we
Yeah.
didn't stripe in right away, and it was sort of just find your space. But then again, it precludes us ticketing somebody, because now there's no spot identified. So that's why, I want to bring it back, and I hear what you're saying, I don't know that we have to accommodate every massive vehicle,
Right.
on
And,
Main
and
Street.
also on the parking spot striping, for example, if we were to stripe them in front of the old Bank of America, or if we were to stripe a parking spot
2 spots can go.
right to the left of the now vacant
Oh, by
chandeliers,
chandeliers, yeah.
right? I mean, we've
Right.
got the ability to basically stripe in the right turn lane.
Right,
Yeah,
Yeah,
Which
we've had
has
about that for
utility.
years.
yeah.
It's already there.
right.
So
People don't know.
I just had a couple of questions. So the first one is, do we as a board want, as a deliverable, like trying to identify what deliverables will be? The work that was done previously was all in village roads.
Mhm.
And like great work in here that we could essentially say, has anything changed?
Mhm.
It's not perhaps a lot of work, it's just, has anything changed in terms of solutions available? And then we just got to make some decisions, because there's a good number of decisions that we haven't made,
Mhm.
right? The second thing is there anything new that we should be thinking about with regards to, and that could be coloring, could be things that have come to the fore over the last 5 years, and that can be part of a deliverable specific to village roads, I think.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like a refresh and an update, but not like a major overhaul,
Right.
right? That's my
So-
first thought.
So maybe, am I hearing like, let's start with what we know we can really work with the larger
Yeah.
toolbox and look at our village roads, our side
Yeah.
streets. You know, we know we want to implement our bike lanes, bike boulevards that
So
are
this is
there, you know,
deliverable one.
things like that,
Right,
like
deliverable
that's.
one.
Would the only issue you might have with that be data collection for some of these radar data points?
Yeah, there may be some locations where we might see the need to get updated counts or updated information,
Especially
especially.
like staff.
Yeah, exactly, especially,
Yeah.
after, it's a classic case of after you stripe in or you install new pavement, speeds are gonna tick up a little bit, it's a smoother surface, people, you don't hear it as well.
Mhm.
It's just a nicer, it's a nicer surface to drive on. And so you sometimes see a speed increase if there's, for example, coming into the village now, now we've got the new medians. I wonder.
What's the effect?
What's the effect of those? Has there been any modest
Mhm.
improvements or reductions in speeds?
Well, this speaks to the second deliverable, I think, which is the first one is what we just talked about. And maybe we need some data, but effectively it's just review what we've done.
Yeah.
Take a look at where, what action items can we immediately implement.
And then we can choose.
Right,
Mhm.
and you ask us what our preference items might be if given a few options.
Yep.
And then we start to take some action, right? Because there's a lot in here that we just simply hadn't done. And when we had redone south, things like parking or chicane, ultimately we just paved it and put in a stop sign, which looks beautiful, but maybe, retroactively do some things that we're talking about. The second deliverable that I think I would like, and this simply because I don't have the capacity or knowledge to do it and to frame it in a way that will matter, is the DOT communication letter with all the things that we absolutely know we want to accomplish, that we agree on,
Mhm.
to be written to the DOT as a point of reference in perpetuity to say, these are the reasons why we want A, B, C, and D. It might involve some data collection on South Main or
Mhm.
Jefferson.
They
And
love
saying,
data.
right, so say to the DOT, right, here's our letter we just wrote, all signed by us, right? Maybe it comes with a letter that can be signed by residents as well, with all the things that we want to get done in the village that the DOT could allow us to do, right, or could do themselves. Coupled with any data, but also specific things that would need to be included in an ATP update to reinforce what was just written in that letter.
Oh, you just read my mind because it's so important that we reference an adopted document by our community. Because they cannot ignore it.
No, and that's.
They're not allowed to.
That's why we produce these or help produce these, and
Yes.
GCC provides funding for it, is that exactly when the DOT is looking to do an improvement project or even a maintenance project, that they can fit in new bike lanes or restripe, smaller, narrower travel
Add
lanes.
parking or whatever
What
it
is
may
it,
be.
has the community provided input on it? Is
Yeah.
there a documented
Yeah.
need for this? And of course, yes, there is.
And we, frankly, we have an election coming up and some of us are gonna be walking around. I would gladly have, hey, would you sign this to the DOT?
They would love to.
Oh my goodness, right? Everybody would
You'll
sign-
never get a no.
So we'll get out of the election cycle
Yeah.
with 350 signatures of people who didn't vote for you, who all want the DOT to finally listen,
Yeah,
100%.
right? And that's powerful.
yeah.
The other quick comment on that would be an understanding, and I don't have this, an understanding how things like the complete streets requirements,
Mhm.
or we've adopted a complete streets program, but sometimes it can undermine our efforts to have more restrictive roadways because you're managing a width laning for bicycles versus intentionally slowing traffic. So you're almost, getting one, giving up the other to do it, right? That was the situation on South Main that comes to mind.
100%.
Because they're not using them.
Right, so in the end, those are the two deliverables I'm thinking about. I don't know if anybody else has
No.
other ideas.
No, I think All good. I just want to speak about the Complete Streets program relative to South Main, because to do the program to enable the bike lanes would be to eliminate parking along there. So, there's always sort of that trade-off of it. That's why the bike boulevards on our alternates on our side streets that we own,
Yep.
plus they're safer, they're quieter.
Yeah.
That's something I really want us to focus on, that we really should be implementing, and what does that look like? And there's a couple other new areas that maybe weren't identified in the previous ATP that we should be looking at too. So, yeah, David.
Can I just ask a random question?
Sure.
Before I head out? So in your opinion, as we look at streets such as South, right, where the speed limit was moved down to 20, but then you look at other streets in the village that we own. So I'm thinking like Rand, right, that intersects Jefferson, that's 25 miles an hour. So how are we, what's the rhyme or reason, and is there a data or statistical analysis that went into how we're selecting those speed limits? Is there any improvement or changes you might think we could do to either synchronize them all, or,
Yeah.
I don't know.
So the 20, this goes back several years.
Uh-oh.
But the 20 should, yeah, but relative to what's the minimum that you can actually post on typical public streets, 25 is less than.
Statewide.
Yes. Unless there is a segment, for example, a school zone, 25 is the minimum to post. The state did change the ability to get reduced speed limits throughout the entire area for municipalities. I know that the town of Pittsburgh looked at doing that, and they have implemented that. I know French, amongst other roads, has been reduced down to
Yes.
25 to 80. So that's fantastic, but generally you want to be consistent. So 25 would be the sort of the across the board minimum that the village looks at. I think, and then what can we do in cases, whether it's at a hotspot segment, what kind of traffic calming treatments are we doing to then help support that 25 or lower
Yeah.
operating speed?
20 was an aberration. Actually.
I've
Just so you know.
always wondered.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
You're not alone. You're not alone, but
Yeah, well, thanks.
yeah,
Feel free to, if you've got my, I'm sure my email has been circulated.
Yeah, we can-
But if you've got any.
we can circulate the information.
Yeah, feel free to always hit me out.
Thank you. Heard nothing but good things, and
Oh, thanks. Appreciate it.
all right, yeah. And
Just structure, I mean, a lot of times, right, thinking about spending taxpayer dollars on consultants, the question ultimately is, what is duplicitous, what is additive, right? What haven't we even done? And what's it gonna cost, right? And, it's work that the administration has a full day, the trustees, we're coming in to try to make great decisions, but in terms of the capacity to do work like this and generate a letter that is convincing to the DOT with the necessary support when we take the ATP, right? Challenging to do because it's not our bailiwick, right? So what would be great for me is, to the degree any other trustee has comments, to sort of put out some of the things we talked about, what the cost might be, and if there's any gradient where if we didn't do this, it might be, a couple $1,000s less, right? So as much bang for the buck as we can get, what may or may not be required. So I think data collection, is that an expensive thing, or is it just, a little part of the process? Do you need it?
Yeah.
Don't divide it up so much that like we're undermining the work.
Right.
But if we can at least have an understanding, like, hey, here's the gold glove, here's silver and bronze. Right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because you've done some great work in the past.
Mhm.
And I don't think any resident, nor yourself, would want to duplicate that work. So now it's more about, okay, what really should we do right now on our roads?
now, how do we build on this?
And how do we,
How
and
do we
how do
build
we
on
give
this?
it,
Like, what are next steps?
how do we give it to Jason and say, okay, proceed,
Mhm.
right? And then with the state roads, I think that's a big,
The state roads, I think that's really where a lot of the data collection comes in, frankly,
Yeah.
because they really, like, how do you know? It's anecdotal.
They
You know.
have to, yeah,
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
they always have to see it. They have to.
Yeah.
Reality standpoint, they need to have that
Yeah.
data justification to go one way or the other. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of data in here. There's a lot of data that we've looked at over the years.
Mhm.
I would even be curious, I haven't looked at it in quite some time, but, what is the difference between what we've seen here and then going back to the 2005 plan to see, you know, to start tracking some of those changes, because historically, do
Mhm.
things change? How much does that need? Because yeah, I agree.
Yeah, that's
If
good
you don't
point.
need additional data collection, don't do it. We have a very good idea
Yes.
Yeah.
based on all that we
Yeah.
collected. That's something that we always stress is that, you know, do not restart, reinvent the wheel if you don't have to.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
The other thing with all this too is maybe South, some data would be useful,
Mhm.
but Maple, Washington, Lincoln and Sutherland.
Mhm.
Doesn't feel like it'd be all that useful. And Sutherland's under construction. Nobody's going,
Repeat data, you mean?
right, for repeat.
No, oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I would agree.
So maybe South perhaps, and then state roads and the state road. With the intent to
To write a letter.
support and
Yeah.
reinforce everything that we're
Mhm, 'cause-
concerned
yeah,
about,
'cause
right?
state needs data.
Yeah.
You know, just in terms of, but again, I think it's sort of part A, part B.
Sure.
You know, in other words, we know if we have our village roads, we can start in on a lot of stuff.
Yep.
Okay, and that's stuff that we can do.
Mhm.
The part B is the state, because that actually to me is the biggest issue for our village. If we owned all these roads, it would be real
But if we did
different.
if we break it up like that, which I think is the right idea, you could do the work on part A, so we can get to work. And
Mhm.
then start in on part B as like. the
Great
second phase,
idea.
Rather than at the same
Yeah,
time.
but part B is
Yeah,
gonna make
I
a huge
think-
impact.
So I'm repeating what
Yeah.
you said, but I think I'm
I
understanding.
get teasing.
Yeah.
And-
How is the state structured? Who's the guy? I mean, it's an octopus, but
It is.
we need a focal point
Yeah.
that we can, you know, we need a guy at the state.
Yeah, the couple gentlemen over there that handle this type of work that we've worked with in the past, unfortunately, one of them is still there. So there's been some disruption continuity. Matt Orbeck.
Oh, he's still there.
Yeah, he's still there.
Wow, okay.
Somebody that was at Labella and he joined DOT back when I started with Labella. Tom Miller.
Tom Miller, okay.
He's now on permits, but he could be somebody that could also
Yeah.
have some purview over this type of work, but Matt Albrecht is certainly a good.
And he's familiar with our village.
Knowledge, yes.
Yeah.
Very familiar, of course, with the village. So,
Yeah.
You know, I seem to recall too, but I wasn't privy to some of the perhaps behind the scenes stuff, but I do recall being able to comment, provide some review on when it did come through
Mhm.
facilities back and do the big maintenance and restriping project.
Mhm.
Where they put in some of the bike lanes or just
Yeah.
looked at the different lane widths. Was that, do you recall that conversation, you know, those conversations with them? You know, it seemed to me that they were very proactive about it, wanting to.
They were receptive,
And very
was my
receptive to-
takeaway, as
Well,
I
you
recall.
know,
That's the one, I'd have to really.
Yeah, I thought they were receptive.
Yeah.
All these, you know, that's good feather in the cap and you know,
Mhm.
good success story that, you know, there is certainly history.
Yeah,
You know, perhaps not to the extent of, you know, getting lanes, entirely removed left turns, right turns,
Yeah.
what have you at four corners, but there's certainly history for receptive interaction.
There was a
Mhm.
formal, we had,
Mhm.
early on, I think I had submitted a request for that commentary. Back from the DOT from Mayor, your letter,
Mhm.
and they were, I was like, half of it we got, maybe not quite,
Yeah,
right, and half of it we didn't.
yeah,
Yeah, and the other, you know, the other momentous projects too, I would say is those, when they also were looking at those, safety zones.
Yes.
Those hotspot zones that were looking.
they were willing to revisit that,
Correct,
Yeah.
yeah, and south, that
Yeah.
crosswalk relocated, reconstructed.
and that's the time to hit them.
Yeah, exactly, and then going over to the library, and then of course, you know, the Del Monte spot and the B in there. Those are, you know, that one was particularly was.
The beacons.
The beacons, that was a big back and forth, but that's another good success story that. You
Yeah.
know, the DOT was receptive, we gotta work course.
Sure.
close-
Which brings me to, the Monroe Avenue Bridge is going to be redone, I believe, in 2029.
Okay.
We can confirm that schedule for them. That opens up another window for us in quite a significant way.
They're here already.
You know, like just keep going.
Our highway folks are looking at the whole.
Yes.
As part of that project.
Yes.
you know, Potential for lane reductions or at least.
They're gonna put in left-hand turn lanes coming up, which is incredible.
Yeah, between that and Bridge and Friend.
Yes.
Yeah, so that, I remember. looking at
But
that.
now is the time to work with them. If they're gonna redo the bridge in 29, they're doing the planning.
Oh,
Yeah.
I know.
That's exactly why I'm bringing it up, exactly, thank you.
Yeah.
So talking about other challenges with the DOT, if you point out a concern like the Jefferson South Main intersection,
Mhm.
which we had.
Mhm.
And we know the challenge, people taking, left-hand turns in front of another left-hand, or people walking right hand side.
Yeah, it was a very serious
Very
pedestrian
serious
accident.
pedestrian accident. And in drawing attention to that sort of thing, no matter what we would suggest as an outcome, DOT say, you're right, we need to widen that out. Like, could they come up with a different solution than what we do?
Oh, yeah.
Something that we don't want.
Something
They
that we
definitely
don't
could.
want. And what is the risk there in anything we might point out in the letter before we put it in the letter?
I certainly, nobody can speak for them, it's certainly within the realm of possibility. But I would say that because there's been so much documented and adopted activity plans, desires, goals, visions for the village and town to an extent. That's helpful that they know right off the bat that this community said earlier, want to be walkable, you want to be bikeable. So they already know that they can't get away with the typical, she's say get away with, but the approach.
Who would implement a typical response to
Yes,
something
the
like
old fashioned. Well, let's look at capacity.
Right.
That's, they wanna, I know in the past. And this is what this is where. We kind of had a challenge, desires there.
Yeah.
With the turn lanes, not being able to remove some of the right turn lanes, and certain approaches.
This is the New York State's
Correct.
capacity.
Correct, yes, and, today, especially, we know that it's down. At the federal level, we've already seen, for example, proven safety countermeasures, that's an FHWA. Section of 28, there were 28 strategies on the website. That's now since been deleted down to 23. They've removed certain strategies that go against what they're being policy for. One of them being certainly capacity and reducing capacity for vehicles in the in the direction of giving it back, perhaps bicycles. It's viewed a little bit more dimly than it used to be. So, it's DOT is not necessarily on that. I've got to ask. They officially stand with certain things, but
You say it's more favorable.
less favorable.
Less
Yeah.
favorable.
Yeah, and it's depending on, where the funding is coming from for. So yeah, state roads, gonna be a little more. Funding base.
Right.
Of course.
Are there grants that we can get below? Or or only if they do it, they do it.
No, there's definitely. Going back, the funding that is earmarked for the pedestrian safety is at those locations. Locations, that was a state plan. So, yeah, that's going back to the previous
Do
administration.
you do that? As well?
Yes,
Granting?
we have Yeah, we have staff.
Yeah, I have to,
Yeah.
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 When you propose solution, be able to get grant
Yeah.
funding opportunity, and is that a lot of sure? I don't wanna like add, we actually get money. If we do A, we have to pay for it ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm not certainly have a lot of this information readily available. There's, you know, at the federal level, USDOT's got and I'll send it out to you, the 17 spreadsheet. Yes.
Right.
Multi funding opportunities.
Oh, yeah.
And things that obviously don't apply here, you know, FTA funding, things like that.
Yeah.
That might, but it provides a very good starting point for at the federal level,
Mhm.
what feds funding you can go after. And then, of course, if you get certain projects programmed in as part of the state highway improvement plans. The projects.
We have CFA.
Tackle that.
Yeah, you know, and it'll also be good. To go back after the ATP to see, you know, that of course, you know, most of these plans, what's the date. You know,
Understanding what we would need to include in the ATP from a language perspective somewhere along the line to reinforce the asks to the DOT,
Mhm.
right? If there's
So
something
David
not in
knows the
there.
language.
They're saying, you want to speak their language.
I want to
Yeah,
speak
you
the
wanna speak the
language,
language.
but when they see it, they think,
Yeah,
yes.
right, I like that, yeah, that works.
Yep, that worked.
So,
Document it.
because we're
Yep, it's fine.
heading through the hour here, so, I just want to make sure let's get some action items coming out of this about next steps. Okay,
yeah.
and I agree with John, you know, they're doing the bridge in 29. Let's start pulling all that together.
I mean, I'd like to sit with Matt Orebeck and say,
Yeah.
okay, look, what is your plan? Can we take
Yeah.
a look at it now? Where are you in development?
Yeah,
Give us something concrete we can look at.
get something going there, definitely. And also, you know, again, just so we're back on their radar as well, because I know that's really important to just even, you know, make those connections again, because it's been a while since we
Yeah.
circled back. Actually, really, frankly, since the Main Street Bridge was done,
Do
you
we
know,
want to
in a
invite
meaningful
the
way.
DOT in?
Oh, yeah,
Just
no,
like
we,
that.
no, exactly,
Yeah.
we can have a sit down.
Yeah, and they're certainly, yeah.
Oh, yeah,
They've
totally.
been privy and open to those invitations.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I would say, just to keep this going, our workshop next month, get Matt in here.
Yeah.
Thanks, make it
Yeah.
next month, so we start the
I
hotline.
agree.
Yeah,
Specifically.
that'll be our action.
29 plans.
Got it, okay.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah.
very good,
Yeah.
You want to send to us a sort of opportunity list or, you know, proposal type of thing, so we can see.
Little something, you know.
Yeah.
we Feel confident enough with our discussion about
Yeah.
pulling something together to bring back to the board,
You know,
you know, for our review. Because, you know, we are anxious to move forward. We've had so many, you know, talks about this. And it is really time for us to revisit this ATP. The town feels the same way. I think we're kind of at that moment, you know, where we can really get things to another level.
Mhm.
No, that's good. I mean, that's the other point of these projects, you know, comp plans, you know, these are the living documents. You know,
Yeah.
Certain goals or interventions, objectives might change or be modified over the years, but you know, what have we done? What can we do better with it?
Yeah.
And how do we improve these?
Yeah.
More implementable.
there may be 80% of what we can do that we don't even need to wait for the ATP to come. Right?
Oh, that's
Yeah,
what I'm saying,
exactly.
part A, part B, part A are our
Yeah.
own streets, and I
Yeah,
think
take a
an
look at it.
action item for us as a board would be let's identify out of this plan, what we can do right
Yeah.
now. And let's put the list together and
I was
prioritize.
gonna say, what would be helpful for us, for me, would be, yeah, what actions have you taken thus far? Can you, sort of give a.
Check those boxes.
Can you give a checklist to us? Of
Yeah.
What was
what-
done off of this
What's
already?
been done,
Yeah.
exactly. That's a good
Okay,
summary.
Alexandria's making a
And
note of
what are
it.
those gaps that we
Yes.
Yes,
to target
Yeah.
and address?
Our last workshop, which is on YouTube, was going through the APP and talking about every single item and what we've sort of done so far,
Mhm.
right? I don't know if we have minutes out there for that,
Mm.
and it isn't necessarily in like bullet point form, but if you did want to listen to something in the background, I'll do it.
It's scintillating.
It's already there.
I'll listen to that while the kids do it.
I was gonna say, if you can't get to sleep, listen to it.
That's right.
I mean, do we feel now that we have a little
yes,
something
yeah.
meeting
A
to-
good plan, yeah. and how we're gonna-
on here?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, I think so.
all right,
So-
okay. This has been really helpful.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a pleasure meeting you all.
Thank you.
It's been great to get back in front of the
Yeah.
village and you and seeing them, and so appreciate meeting everybody.
Yeah.
Appreciate you coming, thank you.
So.
Well, we have a lot of good stuff to build on. This was really, I agree, a lot of good work.
Yeah, I agree.
You know.
It's been proactive for.
We're trying to be.
And for years, continuing to be proactive, and the DOT knows, I mean, the DOT and the county to an extent, but certainly DOT just because of what roads they own.
Yeah.
They know that this village has a voice.
Yes.
And doesn't. and is
That Oravac definitely
and is not
knows.
Afraid to use it.
Yeah.
and speak up.
Right.
And that's something
Yeah.
that. And it's applaudable, obviously. So.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, anything else? We're good? I
No.
make a motion, we adjourn.
Second?
Oh, I wasn't ready.
Hang on.
Trustee Marshall,
Hi.
trustee Lambert,
Aye.
trustee Coe,
Aye.
Chair Plummer,
Hi.
motion passed.
Okay, thank
Thank
you,
you,
everybody.
everyone.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, you're welcome.
This was really helpful.
Good.